To call this meeting to order with the singing of our national anthem. We would like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary or direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none. What happened to Councillor Taylor? Oh, he's with Ed. Okay. Well, we can do a couple of other issues here, such as approval of the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Great. Could we also have an approval, an adoption of the minutes of the previous council meeting? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? Very good. Yes, I need a nameplate. Okay, moving along. We have no presentations, petitions, or delegations tonight, so moving on to item 9 under staff reports. We have a recommendation that report CMS EDC 2020-001 regarding Commute Ontario program update be received. We have a motion to receive that item. Councillor Post, seconded by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Thank you. 9.2, official plan review. Recommendation that report ISPL 2020-001 regarding official plan review, phase 1 work plan be received. I see Councillor Peters has weighed in. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm excited to see this start. As you'll recall, I sort of had brought this up earlier in the term, but through you to Mr. Ward, last time we instigated this process, we had a steering committee made up of various members of the public and staff and councillors. Are we going to have the same sort of involvement from that perspective? Like, will you have a separate group guiding the process with some public input, or is there only sort of the open house piece in terms of public involvement?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters, the focus of this part of the review is going to be more of a housekeeping-oriented exercise. When the exercise first started some time ago, there was quite an extensive engagement component. It involved the steering committee, as you mentioned. It involved some public consultation. What we want to do is we really want to just build off that consultation and get right into the details of doing an audit, essentially looking at what in the policy landscape out there has changed, if anything, and how does that react with our current official plan policy language, and then make some amendments and such as necessary. And through the consultation process outlined in the work plan, we'll be sharing that publicly and obtaining feedback through that process.
Thank you. So may I have a motion to receive this report? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? Thank you. 9.3, recommendation that report CMSFP 2020-001 titled OSPCA HVAC additional funds be received and the council approve the reallocation of surplus funds of $23,067 from the HVAC consulting fees project and a surplus of $20,000 from the Alder HVAC and repairs project towards the OSPC HVAC project. May I have a motion to receive that report and approve it? Okay, Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Thank you. Next, 9.4. This is a report regarding public crosswalk, a recommendation that report ISTD 2020-002, PXO Louisa Street and Elizabeth Street be received, and the council directs staff to implement a Level 2 Type D PXO pedestrian crossing at Louisa and Elizabeth to be funded from the 2020 approved budget. May I have a motion to receive that? Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Peters. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Just a comment and then a question. I think this is a good idea. I'd like to see, obviously, more community safety measures being implemented. I walk Elizabeth Street quite a bit, and there's quite a lot of crossings there. So happy to see that, but I think there needs to be an education or an outreach piece to this, because this will be one of the first of this type of crossing in town. Places like Halifax have it nailed. The drivers know exactly what to do, but I guess encourage everybody to do their homework and recognize that once this is put in place on how to use it. But the specific question I had through you to Mr. Jones is this envisioned to happen right at the intersection of Louisa? Or if you know the area about 20 meters down, there's actually a walkway that leads from the parking lot itself to a set of stairs that goes to the courthouse. And so I didn't know if this was meant to be right at the intersection or where there's already some pedestrian flow at that walkway.
Mr. Jones.
Through your worship to Councillor Peters, we'll look at the specifics of the intersection. You're quite correct that that does seem to be the location for the flow of traffic, and we'll ensure that it's installed in accordance with the Ontario Traffic Manual and how these are supposed to be installed. I suggest that it would be just the one side of the intersection, in much the way it's shown in the figure that's in the report.
Mr. Jones, I also wanted to ask you, on the diagram that is part of our report, it's showing the ladder-style crosswalk. Is that something that the town is going to be implementing as we move forward?
Through your worship, the reason why it shows a ladder-style crosswalk is because that is the standard for when you are installing a PXO being a pedestrian crossover. We historically have not moved to the ladder-style crosswalks in town, and at this point, we don't have any intent in moving forward with that.
Okay. Very good. All right, so did we have you make the motion, second by Deputy Mayor McIntosh. All in favor? Okay, 9.5, this is an agreement with 2216 Ontario, Inc. for the lease of Centre Street parking. Recommendation that report CMSFP 2020-02 title agreement with 2216 Ontario, Inc. for the lease of Centre Street parking be received. May I have a motion to receive this? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, second by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. Okay, next item up is information about the Riddell Road intersections, Alder and Spencer. The report ISTD 2020-03, Riddell Road intersections, Alder and Spencer be received, and the council directs staff to issue a request for proposal for consulting services to review the Riddell Road intersections with Alder and Spencer Avenue / Centennial Road to improve traffic safety for left-turning vehicles while maintaining the arterial road function of Riddell Road as part of County Road 109. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. I don't disagree with this being done, but I thought this council at the beginning talked about an action plan for the whole of the town. Like, I hear councilors want to put a stop sign here and a stop sign here. I thought overall we were going to do a study of the town. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought that was the intent about this time last year, that we were going to do a safety study of the whole town. Could we put this into that? That's kind of the way I was thinking, but instead of piecemealing it here and there, but just my thoughts.
Mr. Jones, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, Your Worship, I do. The work on Riddell Road is a little bit different than where we're going. Based on the recommendations or the motions that were passed on December 16th at the council meeting, there were a number of things that were asked of staff, one of which was to look at traffic calming measures beyond stop signs along Spencer. That report is going to be coming on January 27th, and I don't want to spoil everything that's coming in that report, but essentially that report is looking at traffic calming and potentially moving towards a traffic calming policy in Orangeville. The deputy mayor is exactly correct. We do get regular requests from members of the public to add in all-way stops. This council has heard me speak to the warrants in the Ontario Traffic Manual and how very frequently the requests are not warranted based on the data that we collect. But that said, there is a need for some measure of traffic calming. Oftentimes, things like lower speed limits or all-way stops aren't very effective methods, and so potentially looking at a town-wide traffic calming policy and looking at where traffic calming may be warranted and what types of traffic calming may be warranted would be that sort of town-wide initiative that the deputy mayor speaks of.
Great. Thank you. Councillor Sherwood.
Thank you, Your Worship. This isn't generally a question, it's just a general comment. A couple of things. I agree with Deputy Mayor McIntosh. I thought we were going to be getting a review of service through the whole community, not just one specific neighborhood. Not that I'm against this particular recommendation in the report, but unfortunately I wouldn't support it now until it goes through the proper budget process. There has been no monetary money set aside for it for 2020. So again, like I say, I'm not against it. I'm going to think, depending on how the conversations go with the rest of council regarding this, I'd be putting forward a motion that's come to the that it be dealt with in the 2021 budget. But I would be really interested in waiting and taking on any action on this report until we see what comes before us on the 27th.
Right. Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess for me, the way I remember the safety deputy mayor was there was a group that was coming to us, and there was a lot of chatter about different safety measures that this group wanted to put in, and one of the ideas was 40 kilometers an hour throughout the town. We haven't heard back from that group. I don't remember anything formal being discussed about how we would come across that. So that's my recollection of how that came to be. For this one, I did have a chance to speak with Mr. Jones prior to this meeting, and there is some confusion amongst the residents about where the stop signs are. So I do just want to make sure everybody is aware that stop signs are coming up, and Mr. Jones referenced it. They'll be on the next meeting agenda. For me, I don't want to push this. I would like those intersections looked after tonight. I'd like us to vote this through and have the advanced greens put in. I'm hearing from residents that, roundabouts aren't necessarily going to work in that area, and perhaps that's not the right way to go. Leaving it, to me, it just makes me crestfallen. I can't think of something more emotional to offer than to leave it and not do something now. We've got 700 people that have signed a petition. We've had quite a bit of an upraising in the area about it, and candidly, enough's enough. Let's just act on this and get this done. Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Two quick questions through you to Mr. Jones. First, so the recommendation to issue a request for proposal for consulting on those intersections, could you comment on the ballpark of where you think that might fall? And second question, you have some costs identified in the report to go to either a dedicated advanced left or what I'll call a typical advanced left. Are those only for northbound traffic, or do those costs include both north and southbound at both intersections, for example?
Mr. Jones.
Through your worship to Councillor Peters, I'll answer the second question first. It is both for northbound and southbound advanced turns. With respect to the costs, the idea was that we would hire a consultant to evaluate, based on direction from council, the various items that are mentioned in the report, whether there would be an advanced left, a fully protected advanced left, whether it was warranted at all, whether we would look at moving towards a roundabout. All of these things would be looked at as part of this, as well as evaluating the geometrics of the intersection. I'd suggest, if you're putting me on the spot, I'm going to say plus or minus $30,000, maybe a little bit less, depending on the full scope of it and what the consultant felt was necessary to get this work done. But the intent is that it's got to be evaluated in the context of the other sets of signals along Riddell. We did speak with county staff on this, as I've noted in the report, and Riddell Road does form a very fundamental part of County Road 109, and they have concerns about making isolated changes at two sets of signals to put in advanced greens without evaluating what the impact would be on the flow of traffic through there. The concern being that there could be unexpected consequences. An example would be if putting these turns in decreased the amount of green time on Riddell, vehicles may look to bypass Riddell and start driving along Spencer and Alder to get over to the B line. Certainly, you know, that's not something that we would want as a consequence of this. So this needs to be looked at holistically.
Very good. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship, and a couple of comments. And I just wanted to say to Mr. Jones, thank you very much for the very thorough report. It has helped out for those of us that are not necessarily traffic or road experts, but I think the approach that you've given has provided some simplicity, but also some detail that's required. My point that I wanted to share, and I truly understand and sympathize with Councillor Taylor's view on this. I understand we have a passionate community that is concerned about a particular intersection. We also have other intersections that not necessarily are the same problem, but I think that the report that is going to be coming out on the 27th will certainly help out with some clarification. My concern is, where's this money coming from to pay for this? We haven't had any dialogue whatsoever. You know, and are we going to be dipping into reserves? Are we going to be looking at a line item that we have not discussed? So that's one of my concerns about this, because, again, I express and I respect your passion in supporting the members of the community who are concerned about this. But I think that we all, as members of council, when we're making a decision, we want to make sure that we have an understanding where and how we're going to pay for this. So where's the money coming from? And it hasn't been discussed at all.
Thank you. Councillor Post.
Thank you very much. At this point, my comment would be that I think that I'm in agreement with Councillor Taylor that we need to move ahead with this now. This is a neighborhood that's been waiting for a resolution for it, and the longer that we continue to push it back, the longer the process is going to take. At this point, there's no money being spent. We're issuing a request for proposal to find out what that money is, and that's a really great starting point. And once we hear that portion of it, we can make a decision on how we need to proceed. But if we continue to hold items off in the hopes that something's going to happen, nothing's going to happen. So I think at this point, moving this report forward, approving the report, and moving on with the request for proposal is an appropriate place to start to see where we can move on. And I too look forward to the comments that are going to be coming at the next meeting to find out the rest of the solution, because I think holistically, you're probably right. There's probably going to be some solutions that are going to come in there. But as Mr. Jones referenced, this one's a little bit of a different beast on Spencer and Riddell specifically, and it's going to require a little bit extra level of consultation. So I think that moving forward with that process is an important place to go, so I'm supportive of moving that motion forward today.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you. I also support Mr. Taylor's passion. It would be great just to put advanced screens in next week. I just worry legal-wise, traffic flow-wise, we need to make sure we get a consultant, somebody that knows exactly what these traffic lights are going to do. It's certainly not council that's going to know that. We're not traffic experts. So we need to look to the experts and take their advice. I agree. I think it's needed. Personally, it looks like it's needed, but I'm not an expert in traffic signals, so I would like to get some official and legal opinions on that.
Right. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship. Again, I'm just trying to get clarification from my fellow councillors. You're not wanting to approve necessarily the green lights now, the advanced greens? You're just saying to get a consultant to review that intersection? Because again, where's the money going from? Our council has been very, very strong that they don't want debt, they don't want to borrow from reserves. Where's the money coming from? This has to be a budgeted item. And I'm sorry, it's not that I'm against this, but I want to make it perfectly clear. If we're approving tonight the the advanced greens. Here we are in January, and it's already started where we're starting to get requests to spend money and to come up with funds that we haven't budgeted for. And this is only January. So that's the only reason I wouldn't approve it. So I want to know, is council just tonight directing a consultant and not putting in the advanced greens?
As I
Immediately.
read this,
The report seems to indicate that they're wanting us to choose one of the
Well,
4 options.
9.6 reads, "And that council directs staff to issue a request for proposal for consulting services to review the Riddell Road intersections with Alder Street and Spencer Avenue to improve traffic safety for left-turning vehicles." So,
Could I ask a further question to
Mr.
Mr.
Jones?
Jones? Mr. Jones, can you please clarify for me, because like I say, I'm all in approval of things that we've budgeted for, because again, it's early in the year, in January, and here we are asking for money to be spent that we don't have. Is this just strictly to get a consultant, and do you have any idea how much the consultant is? And by approving your recommendation, are we approving the advanced green going forward?
Mr. Jones?
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Sherwood, the recommendations of the report are to hire a consultant. The scope of the consultant's work is fairly general, as described in the report. One of the questions I would ask council, if they are going to approve this tonight, is whether they want to include roundabouts as part of the consideration. That was part of the motion from the 16th that's been addressed in this report. If it's strictly for assessing traffic signals, the cost may be somewhat less, maybe around $20,000 to hire a consultant to review this. But again, they're going to want to look at the implications throughout the Riddell Road corridor to make sure that any work that was recommended in terms of installing left turns weren't going to result in other challenges along Riddell Road. But the expectation was that were council to approve this funding tonight, staff would prepare an RFP and hire a consultant to review this, and that those recommendations would then come back to council prior to any action being taken.
Mr. Jones, could you also confirm who controls that road? You've talked about the county being involved. Whose road is it? Just to clarify.
Your Worship, the short answer is it's ours.
Right.
One of the challenges is that it was always an expectation when Riddell Road was built that it would form part of the county's road network. And when what at the time was referred to as the South Arterial Road, which is the southerly extension of County Road 109 beyond town line out to Highway 10 was constructed, the expectation is that there would be a swap of roads, as it were, because the county would no longer really need the B line and part of town line is County Road 23, because Riddell Road and County Road 109 would serve that function. There have been several efforts made over the years to try and complete that exchange. It hasn't worked out that way. The town still owns, operates, and maintains Riddell Road. However, the county does winter maintenance, and it's simply a flow of winter maintenance vehicles. Their vehicles continue along 109, and it only makes sense for them to stay on Riddell. In exchange, we do some maintenance work on the B line as well as on the town line portion of County Road 23 in exchange for them. Because Riddell Road operates as a very important part of the county's road network, a part of County Road 109, anytime we're dealing with operational issues associated with Riddell Road, we consult with the county because it does impact the flow of traffic through there. My understanding as well is that when Riddell Road was built, the county did also contribute some funding towards it. So it's not a short answer to your question. It is our road, but we operate it in consultation with our partners at the county.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll weigh in, I guess, on the RFP versus the left turn signal, that sort of thing. I think the traffic data we have to date has shown that it's not by the book warranted. I worry we're going to be paying a consultant to tell us what we already know. That said, obviously the decision is a little more about safety and residents and politics than it is perhaps engineering. So I don't really support the idea of going out and spending $20,000 or $30,000 on a reporter or consultant that I think is going to generate very little new information for us. If we are going to look at larger aspects of the town, I'd rather roll in more intersections and be more holistic and get more value out of those dollars. So I don't really support the idea of the RFP. That said, you know, the 30, 20 or 30 for a consultant versus, you know, we could be spending another 70 or 80 on the signals themselves. So if we jump right to that conclusion and save the money on the consulting side of things, you know, overall the budget is better off. You know, I'd like to hear a little more discussion on it, but I think the RFP at this stage isn't really going to get us much further, and it's certainly not going to get us there any quicker.
Okay, so we have a recommendation, okay, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, thank you, Councillor Peters. I think that made a lot of sense. I would be willing as a compromise if this was a budget issue, if this is truly what we're concerned about. However, there is a safety issue, perceived or not. There's 700 people who live in an area that have signed a petition. I'm not going to put it out as a motion, but if it meant delaying it and ensuring it was part of the budget and everyone committed that it was in the budget in the interest of getting this done, I would certainly be welcome to that. However, my social commentary on this whole thing is that I remain grateful that the citizens of Orangeville have elected me to sit in this chair. And for the most part, I'm enjoying this role. However, as I sit here tonight, like, this is just so frustrating. And democracy is a wonderful thing, and I certainly support it, but I'm not aligned with this. I think we're wasting our time. We've got people who have come to us, and it's wrong to push this. We should be approving this tonight and getting this done. And that's my frustration with this role as councillor.
Thank you. Mr. Jones.
Your Worship, if I could just speak to some of the comments that Councillor Peters made, and just to provide a little bit of clarification what the consultant would be looking at. We need direction and we need guidance from someone who has looked at all of Riddell Road to look at signal timing, what the different phases are, how much would be the side street phase, how much would be the through phase, the degree to which signals could be synchronized, what impact putting in advanced greens would have, how long the advanced green should be, whether we should be going with fully protected advanced greens as described in the report, or just advanced greens, recognizing the fully protected gives a greater level of safety for those residents, but arguably a lower level of convenience. There's a number of questions that need to be answered, not solely whether we want to move forward with this initiative or not, but to provide options and to look at what the implications of those decisions will be with respect to timing and so forth. We need to have a good idea of where it's going because we do not want to create a bigger problem than the one that we've got now. And the intent of hiring a consultant was to get that professional guidance that would allow us to do this right and to do it once.
Councillor Sherwood, thank you.
Your Worship, through you to either Mr. Jones or perhaps the Treasurer, is there a contingency fund that we would be using to pay for this consultant fee? Because again, I'm going back to it not being in the budget.
Mr. Jones.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Sherwood, I expect that it would be coming out of the General Capital Reserve.
Reserves, thank you.
Okay. All right. Mr. Jones, can you tell us the timing of an RFP and the results of that consultant report?
To hire a consultant, Your Worship, we need to go through our procurement policy approach. We would have to prepare the RFP, advertise it, receive proposals, review them, select a consultant, go through the various contractual things that we have to do to get them on board before they could start work. I suspect that going through that process would be in the order of 2 months before we have a consultant up and running, and then it would take, as long as it would take for them to carry out the review, I'd suggest another 2 to 3 months, so we would probably be back here talking about this sometime in the summer.
Right. Okay. Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to build on that question, if the flip side were to occur through you to Mr. Jones, if for example, a decision was made to implement something tonight and skip the consulting process, how would town staff go about determining those factors, such as timing and implementation? Just as some background.
Mr. Jones.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Peters, while we have engineers and we have technologists within the Infrastructure Services Department, we are by necessity generalists. We oversee not only our road network, we oversee water and wastewater systems, we oversee a transit system, we oversee a cemetery. So we have to be generalists. We don't have anybody who is truly an expert on this. We would consult with the county and look at this, and we would try and determine amongst us what the best signal timing would be, and discuss with the county what the implications might be at the other sets of signals. However, that isn't what we're recommending. We're recommending hiring somebody who is an expert to evaluate this holistically to ensure that when we implement a solution, it is a solution that is going to work and not result in unexpected and unwanted consequences.
Councillor Post.
Thank you very much. Thank you for those comments, Mr. Jones. I agree. I think we're not in the business of making things more unsafe, and that's what we're running a risk of by moving forward with that. I'm generally not a fan of hiring consultants. I think, you know, we've got some really great people working for our town, but when they're telling us we need the consulting expert to make sure we're doing the right thing, I agree with them. I'd like to move forward the recommendation as is written in the agenda. I would add the piece, if it would maybe make Councillor Sherwood feel a bit better about it, is when it comes time to pay for the consultant and for moving forward with this project, would you be in support of perhaps paying for it out of general capital reserves right now with the condition that during the 2021 budget it would be accounted for and repaid back?
Councillor Sherwood.
Again, I'm 100% in support of this if it's approved through a budget process. I know it sounds like it's just me being the rotten apple here about using reserves, but I know all of my fellow councillors stand on the fact that we don't want to be spending reserves. And again, I'm talking, here we are in January and already we're starting to go without our budget. I 100% would support this in the 2021 budget. I realize it is a safety issue, and I am very much supportive of it. I would rubber stamp it right now if it was in the budget. But if we can be guaranteed that this will be replenished back into our reserves, then you'll have my full support.
Mr. Jones, back to the roundabout discussion. I would like, if we are going to hire a consultant, I'd like that consultant to consider roundabouts. I don't know what the footprint requirement is for a roundabout, but perhaps we could learn that through adding that into a consultation. Mr. Jones?
Certainly, Your Worship. And as noted in the report, we're not experts on roundabouts either. Orangeville doesn't have any currently, and they are still fairly new in Ontario, although we're seeing them implemented with fairly good levels of success in different places. Certainly, that's something else we could ask a consultant to look at. And, you know, certainly with this being a truck route, the footprint of a roundabout would likely have to be larger. One item noted in the report that I would like to point out as it relates to roundabouts that we discovered during our research into them is this concept of platooning, and that typically they don't like to install roundabouts on a traffic corridor where there's traffic signals. You had asked us to look into the Franklin and Pine Bush roundabout in Cambridge, and indeed it turns out that that is the largest of a series of roundabouts that were installed along Franklin, so that they would avoid this issue. The idea being that if you have a set of traffic signals ahead of a roundabout that's reasonably close, you'll end up with the light turning green in this platoon, this plug of traffic heading from the signal down to the roundabout. And that's not an ideal set of circumstances. Roundabouts function a lot better when traffic is coming in bit by bit as opposed to all at once. And so if we were to be looking at it at Spencer and potentially at Riddell, is it something that we look at along that entire corridor? Obviously, that's something that would be costly, but it would certainly be something that we would have to look at to ensure that installing roundabouts in these locations was something that didn't create a problem that was unforeseen. And that's where having a consultant who has some expertise in roundabouts providing us with that advice would be helpful.
Okay, well, just to wrap this up, I think what I'm hearing is we probably should hire a consultant and get the proper information. I think we're all in favor of safety here and spending money on safety, but no, ma'am, not right now, no. So I think we should be moving ahead with the recommendation. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, just to get back to my fellow councillor, Councillor Post, you put the motion through to be exactly the way that it is. Can you put a friendly amendment to include something about if the consultant fee comes out of the reserves, that it be replenished through the 2020 process? You're good at putting a friendly amendment, and then I will gladly support your motion.
Okay, so I guess Councillor Taylor.
I just want to finish off the comment about Riddell itself. And I'm moving away a little bit from, we've moved to a holistic conversation here. You know, the fact that the Riddell is still considered as the bypass is a bit humorous as well. It is not a bypass. It is a regular street now in which people interact and move along through lights, and neighborhoods are on either side of it. You know, there's a whole bunch of issues with that bypass now where I'm still so thankful that we've gotten it back in the day, but now there's other issues that have cropped up because our town has continued to grow and traffic has been busy. So, you know, examples would be trying to get across the Lockyer Bridge at 5 o'clock. You can't get up and around the truck traffic there, right? So there's a whole bunch of things that, you know, I'd love to see this council look at with that road. And if you're really adding things onto a consultant and talking about roundabouts and other things, and maybe Riddell Road itself just needs to be looked at and said, hey, how do we make this road as an entirety more efficient? But I'd suggest right now we're blessed to have it. I'm thankful that we have it, but it's not an efficient road.
Are you saying we need a bypass for the bypass?
We could
that
use
what
a
you're
new bypass. We could use a new bypass, yes.
Okay, so here we are. Councillor Post has made a recommendation. I believe Councillor Sherwood was seconding this. So I think we need to have a vote on this at this point. Sorry? You're not a seconder. Okay. All right, Deputy Mayor McIntosh is going to second this. The friendly amendments were Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, I just wanted to point out, could we be clear if we're going to do a friendly or an amendment to the motion, if council is in agreement spending the extra money to study roundabouts as well?
That was what I was about to just add. The two friendly amendments were considering roundabouts and also having the money returned, if it's going to be spent in this year, returned to reserves in 2021 through the budget process, which is what Councillor Sherwood had recommended. Councillor Taylor. One more. Yes, sir.
I'm sorry, Worship. I just want to make sure I understand. So when you say roundabouts, we've been talking about two intersections in particular, but now would you talk about roundabouts at all of the intersections, including as you come down to Riddell and Broadway?
Well, I would.
Like, I just think we need to be clear.
As Mr. Jones had just said, it looks, because of this platooning issue, you know, the consultant might come back and say, the only way roundabouts will work here is if we run the table.
Agreed.
And do the entire run. So be it. We need to have some expert in that to provide that information to us, as well as what are the implications of the left-hand turns. And Mr. Jones, I think everybody would like to try and accelerate this RFP process as much as possible so that we can have a resolution of this sooner than later.
If I may, Your Worship, conversations that I've had, and, you know, I was one of the people knocking on doors, people aren't asking for roundabouts, just to be clear. I agree we need to have all the information, but that's not what 700 people asked for.
Of course.
So,
No, I'm well aware of that.
Okay, thank you.
But when we have an expert in those matters hired, I think using their brain to give us a little bit more, which we might use somewhere else in town or in the county, I think it'd be worthwhile adding that into our request. So we have those two friendly amendments. We have a recommendation on the floor to hire a consultant. All in favor? Opposed? Mr. Peters is opposed. Okay. Moving along. We have 9.7 now, which is sign variance application. This is RLB LLP and their sign variance application for a larger sign at 273 Broadway. Recommendations that report CPS CL 2020-001 regarding sign variance application RLB LLP be received, and the council grant a variance to sign bylaw 282013 as amended to permit a ground sign located at 273 with a maximum sign area of 2 square meters per side with internal illumination, conditional upon obtaining a sign permit. May I have a motion? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Any opposed? We have another sign variance application under 9.8. This is report CPSCL 2020-02 regarding sign variance application by 203-1892 Ontario Inc., Shell Station at 226 Broadway, and that council grant a variance as a, to sign bylaw 28-2013 as amended to permit a ground sign to include an electronic message display conditional upon a sign permit. May I have a motion to accept this? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? We also have an encroachment agreement. Recommendation is that report ISTD 2020-01, encroachment agreement at 20 Stewart Court, be received, and the council pass a bylaw authorizing the entering into and execution of an encroachment agreement between the town and 1105779 Canada Inc. with respect to a small shed and concrete wall, which shall remain on a sanitary sewer easement in favor of the town on the property at 20 Stewart Court. May I have a motion? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. Also, we have a housekeeping zoning bylaw amendment, Town of Orangeville zoning bylaw 2019, or 2090, I should say, as amended under ISPL 2020-02. The recommendation that report ISPL 2020-02, a housekeeping zoning bylaw amendments under the Town of Orangeville zoning bylaw 2019 as amended be received, and that staff be directed to initiate a housekeeping review of the zoning bylaw as amended to consider the proposed modifications to the bylaw as summarized in attachment number 1 to this report. May I have a motion? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. And 9.1 is an OPP transition update from the CAO's office, CAO 2020-01. We have a recommendation that this report be received. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm very glad to see that the OPP is talking to the auxiliary group from the OPS. I know there was some concern with the public about where our auxiliaries would end up, and we were assured they'd be taken on if they wanted to, and I'm just glad to see that's part of their process. Thank you.
Good. Mr. Brennan, do you have anything further to comment on this? Okay. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just for the public to know, and for council, the next police services meeting, there will be discussions, further updates. Mr. Brennan will be attending our meeting, talking about how that transition is going, and there'll be more information for the public at that time. And I'm sorry, Your Worship, it's not this. It's a week and a half from now. I think it's the
23rd.
23rd. Thank you. So if anybody from the public would like to attend, and that one is at the police station, I believe, in the boardroom. Okay, thank you.
Ms. McDonald, is that correct? Is it at the police station? All right. Thank you. Okay, so may I have a motion to accept this report? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? Okay, we have no correspondence. Question period. There was a woman there that wanted to ask a question. I guess she has left. Anybody from the audience who wish to ask a question of council? Seeing none, we'll move on to notice of motion prior to meeting. Item 13.1, Councillor Peters. This is regarding environmental awareness and action. Councillor Peters, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I read it last time, so I'll save the trouble this time, but basically this motion is just in support of conservation authorities and what they do, and specifically what Credit Valley Conservation does for the town of Orangeville and the Credit Valley watershed in general. There's been some conflict with the province in a bit of a shuffle in how conservation authorities may or may not do business in the future, and this is meant to provide support to what CBC does and their actions moving forward. So I could take any questions if there are any, but otherwise I'll make the motion.
Okay, we have Councillor Peters making the motion, Councillor Post is seconding it. All in favor? All right. Councillor Peters, go ahead, sir.
Sorry, I think I jumped the line, but I will. I do have another one. It's not written out. It'll be for next time. But Sustainable Orangeville met earlier this month, and if you recall, during the budget conversations, there was some surplus from that committee, and what the committee would like to see happen with those that surplus, yet to be decided as we go through the auditing process, but is to establish that. That surplus as a specific reserve fund dedicated to sustainable measures. So it'll be written up in time for the next council meeting, but this is just in advance of that, and we've started conversations with the treasurer in that regard.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Post and I spent Saturday together, and we did some visiting and different appointments that we had, and one of the meetings that we had was with the family up on the hill at Rolling Hills. And this family's house was struck by a vehicle, a motorized vehicle, over the holidays. The person driving the vehicle, instead of making the turn at Rolling Hills, went into their house, took out their deck, took out their fence. And so Councillor Post and I thought it was important that someone from our council go and speak to them. We had sat at their kitchen table and had quite an emotional discussion about how safe they felt in their property and what was happening there. And we wanted to try and do something with them to hopefully ensure that, you know, an event like this doesn't happen again and that they're protected. So we did work with Mr. Jones on some ideas that him and his staff had come up with that would help. He provided that input to us, and we've just gone a little bit further. Mr. Jones is aware of what these things are, and I'd just like to read a notice of motion that we'd like to put together. It'll be a Post and Taylor notice of motion. So if I could, whereas there was a motor vehicle accident on January 2nd, 2020, in which a vehicle was traveling eastbound on McCannell Avenue, failed to negotiate the left-hand turn onto Rolling Hills Drive, resulting in the vehicle crashing through the fence and into the backyard of the residence at 389 Marshall Crescent. Whereas this is the second time this house has been hit by a traveling motor vehicle, the last incident was 2015. Whereas the family who live at this location have been traumatized by the incident, it is important that the town take action. Whereas town staff have suggested the following measures be enacted. Install roadway alignment signs on both McCannell and Rolling Hills, the appropriate distance ahead of the curve in accordance with the Ontario Traffic Manual, Book 6. Install 2 checkerboard signs, one direction at the intersection of Rolling Hills and McCannell, one facing each road so that a checkerboard sign will be visible to drivers approaching the intersection from either direction. And lastly, plant some boulevard trees on Rolling Hills along the flankage of 389 Marshall Crescent as part of our 2020 tree planting program. Whereas Councillor Post and Taylor have visited the owners of 389 Marshall and have noted the recommendation for further safety measures. In addition to the measures recommended by staff, Councillor Post and Taylor suggest the following. Roadway has lanes painted on the roadway on McCannell and Rolling Hills. Currently, there are no lines in place to ensure cars stay in the lane. And I'll move just off of this for a quick second. When you go up to, and I encourage everybody to go up if you haven't already and look, it's very bizarre where the car went and hit the house. It makes no sense. It actually looks like it should go straight. The car actually goes off on a curve directly at the house. And one of the things that the owners were saying is when you're going around that curve, you kind of forget where your lane is because there isn't a line. So as background for you. Barricades installed on the bend along the Rolling Hills protecting 389 Marshall. And this is slightly different than what was addressed to us by town staff, but When we shared with the resident the idea of trees, the idea was we're thankful, but please do more because the trees aren't going to stop. This house has actually been hit 3 times, twice where the house was actually hit, once where another car went off the road and hit trees and took out the trees. So trees, yes, but we're hoping that we do a little bit more than that. And then vibrating rumble strips are installed on the roadway at the base of the hill on the east end of McCannell to control speed of motorists that are entering McCannell at the intersection of Highway 10 and the bypass, as the curve is a blind when driving up the hill. And what we mean by that is we did it. We actually turned around and came back up that hill. It's quite a while before you actually see the crest of the hill. And it's intuitive. You feel like you should be going faster along there than you are. And if you think about it too, lots of times people are going fast along there because unfortunately they're going to a destination due to medical care. And they're coming through a bypass, yeah. So it's intuitive that you do that. And then lastly is that signs be installed on the hill up McCannell along the south side of Rolling Hills to give ample warning that there's an upcoming curve and speed should be measured. And we'll put that forward, and I can send that to you, Madam Clerk, prior to the next meeting. And thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any other notices of motion at meeting, councillors? Seeing none, any new business? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I just wanted to take a couple of minutes to thank our Public Works staff for working on the weekend and dealing with the flood issues that we had throughout the community. And of course, when we have the kind of weather that we've had over the last, say, 72 hours, as much as many people reached out to many of us over the weekend, many of us also took the time to take a look at some of the destruction that took place. But really kudos to the Public Works staff and those that took a lot of time to ensure the safety of our residents by putting up signs, restricting access, despite the fact that people braved themselves going down Town Line and other places where they probably shouldn't have, but these, taking risks. But no, really commending the staff for the amount of time and effort that they put in on the weekend to ensure the safety of our community. So thank you, Mr. Jones, for your team.
Hear, hear. Very good. Any other new business, councillors? Okay, moving on to bylaws. This is a recommendation. The bylaws listed below be read 3 times and finally pass. A bylaw to authorize the entering into of a lease agreement with 266-2216 Ontario, Inc. regarding the Centre Street parking lot, and a bylaw to authorize entering into an encroachment agreement with 111-05779 Canada, Inc., 20 Stewart Court regarding a sanitary sewer easement, and C, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at its regular council meeting held January 13th, 2020. May I have a motion? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Thank you. All right.